Welcome to another edition of the Sim Racing Garage. I'm Barry Rowland. In this episode, I'll be building the ASR6 aluminum profile cockpit from the guys at Advanced Sim Racing. This is part one of a two-part review series on the ASR6 called The Build. In part two of the series called The Setup, I will be adding sim racing gear and testing in real-world conditions. Time to put this cockpit through the SRG's review process and see how it does. So, let's get to it. So let's take a closer look at the materials we're going to be using here for our build of the ASR6 cockpit. Now, first thing you'll notice is they're white. And they have a powder coat on them. It's not just an anodization or paint. These have been properly powder coated and very nicely done here. Very nice gloss finish to everything. Just nicely done. And you can see that this is a solid profile. In other words, there's no holes in the channels over here, and it's a smaller hole in the middle, not a very large one. So this is what I would call a full strength profile. And they're using it in this piece. They're using it in this piece here, which is one of the support pieces for the shift mounter. We'll find out more about that as we build it, obviously. And on this double 15 series piece of profile. Yeah, these are very well done as far as the powder coat goes. They just did a really nice job. And of course, white, that's subjective as far as whether you would like that or not. And this is a 15 series profile. Every other cockpit I've built from profiles has been from using a 40 series. And 15 series is the same thing, obviously, just a standard measure system instead of the metric measure system. And yeah, so essentially though, they're close enough in the measurements as far as channels and the size and everything that they're interchangeable. You can put a 40 series bracket on a 15 series and vice versa. They can switch back and forth. The T-nuts will fit swappable. So really, it's nice that you know that even if you buy a 15 or a 40 series profile to start with, that you can, if you run across some 15 series, that you can use that in interchange as long as your nuts, your T-nuts and your bolts are the right sizes, which they are too, but they're going to be a different thread size because one's standard, one's metric, obviously. So yeah, nicely done powder coating. I like that they're solid here. Now these pieces, what I call 4160s, but they call these 1.5 by 6 inch because we're using standard. So this is 6 inch wide. This has some holes in it, right? But kind of smallish holes. They're not very large. And they're still the same, I believe, in the middle here. They're the same thicknesses. And I'll use a piece of 40 series to look at the differences. See, this is called a light. Now, it's not the extra light, but it is a light series. You can see how much larger the holes are in those channels there. So, and of course, this is going to be lighter than something of the same size in this, which is solid. And you can feel this as soon as you pick it up. It's a heavy unit. So this is going to be a pretty heavy cockpit compared to a 40 series light that I've built a few of those before. Again, not that much heavier, but still it's going to be heavy. And let's see, what else can we talk about here? We're going to use these brackets here, which are some very solid units. You can see that instead of filling in the sides with gussets, they have a complete triangle here. And this is 1/4 inch thick or around 6 mil thick. And so it's a very obviously strong piece here. This is not going to be crushed. This is not going to be bent. This is a very, very tough unit here. And we're going to be putting these bolts in here. Now, these are not M8, although they're very close to the same size as an M8. These are 5/16, again, because everything is standard here. So 5/16 by a 1/0 pitch. And yeah, the same thing's going on with the T-nuts. Now, these are button heads instead of socket head caps, and I'll show you why they're using those in a second instead of socket head. And these are the spring ball T-nuts that we're putting in there. And again, this is the only way to build a rig is with these guys, because we can put them in the ends, slip them in like this, or you can come in when you already have your rig completely assembled and just take the T-nut and kind of push it down into the groove like this. And it kind of rests there, and then you can take your finger and kind of push it up, and it locks into the channel. Still moves, but it won't come out. Very cool. Again, this is the only way to build a rig is with these things. So I'm glad to see that they included them in there. Now let's talk a little bit about the bracket differences. Now this is a typical bracket that I get from 40 series manufacturers. And it is a gusseted aluminum. It has the hole filled in here where the other one does not. But you can see the sides are much thinner than the thickness of what's going on with this bracket. And we got some hollowed out pieces on the bottom too to make this even lighter. So this would be a light type of gusseted bracket that I use all the time and never have a problem with. So I know these are going to be very, very stiff, and I have a problem with those. Now, there are no tabs on this for channel anti-twist tabs, if you will, and there are on this. And just as a demonstration to show you how compatible these guys are with each other, 40 series bracket on a 15 series profile. There it is. Fits just perfect. And I can run an M8 bolt in there and a regular, as long as I have the right T-nut on it. Right now, I would need an M8 T-nut. But in this case, we're using, again, the 5/16 nut bolts over here and the 5/16 T-nuts because of the series. But just to show you how this fits in here. Now, also, let me show you one more thing here. This is the M8 bolt, typically what I use in construction, and it has a socket head cap on it. You can see it's much bigger than the button heads, or some people actually call these a pan head. But yeah, you can see the differences on how these are made. Right, so we've got a bit more material in there. I prefer these if I can get them, but there's nothing wrong with these. I mean, they're going to do fine. But the reason is, if I take this and put it in here, a button head, and I put another one in there, I don't have any problems with them hitting each other. If I take the socket head caps and put one in there, and I put another one in here, you can see I got interference issues. They won't go down. So because they're using these brackets, we can't use them. So that's why we're not using them. But everything will be just fine with these 5/16 button heads. You just don't want to over torque them, and make sure that you get a wrench that fits them properly, because you want to be careful with that. A little bit more careful than you have to be with a socket head cap, because you can see a lot more metal, and it's just got a lot more reinforcement around the hole than these guys do. But these have worked fine. People use them all day long for a very long time and never had any issues with them. So I guess that's it as far as looking at the construct materials we're using to build this ASR6. So we'll just get on to the building process now. So as you can see, I have the three main pieces of the chassis laid out. And the back piece is 19 inches long, or about 83 millimeters. And we have these long pieces here, are 50 inches long, around 1270 millimeters or so. And remember, this is a 15 series system. As far as the profile goes, we're using all standard hardware and equipment. So that means this is a 5/16 bolt in here, these little button heads. I've preloaded these, the little corner brackets we're using. You can see I've already got a couple of them on here. And I just want to give you guys a close-up of what I'm doing here. Spring ball T-nut. We have our bolt in there, and then we have one on the other side. So it's kind of preloaded. All I have to do is slide it in. At least that's the idea. Now, the only thing to remember here is this is not metric, again, and we're going to need a 3/16 hex wrench to attach it with. So can't use my metric wrenches for this. I have to pull out the old standard stuff, which I use a lot anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So what I'm going to do is go over here and slide this one into the top of the back piece, very top channel, just like I have the two over there. You see how I pre-configured this. Slide it in enough to clear the edge, so obviously I can push this in without any interference. I'm just going to snug this up a little to keep it from twisting on me and get it about even with the edge. And then it's just a matter of kind of bringing this up. I might have to push the profiles in a little bit to get them where I need them to be. I'll start one and start the other one over here. And you can usually get it's a little wiggly, when you're doing it, but just take your time, be a little patient, and it should be okay. And then I'm going to bring the other side in and do the same thing over here. I'll give you guys a closer shot of that, what I'm doing on that side. Get the bottom one lined up. My hand in the way, you can't see what I'm doing. And chances are, as you're lining up one, another one will want to move on you, because that's the way this stuff works. So I usually use two hands, two fingers to get them started like that. And once they're started, obviously, if they haven't come out the other side, you can just kind of slide this in a little bit until, well, the one down here came out. Okay, there we go. Just wiggle it around a little bit, and it finally comes together. And I'm going to want this to be even, this face on this side to be even with the rear of these profiles. So I'm going to do that on one side and then the other. And then kind of just come in here with my wrench, snug this up a little bit, just a little bit, because I'm just bringing it in. I don't want to get it real tight yet. And you should have nice square corners here on this system, because profile in general, aluminum profile, when you're building it and you're using these 90-degree brackets here, then it will give you perfect 90-degree squares out here on your legs, or whatever you want to call this. And yeah, just come back here, make sure I have it snugged up. And then I'll check a few things just to make sure I'm nice and flush down here on the bottom and the top, because sometimes you can get flush on the top, and it's because I have this on cardboard, it can lean a little bit, which I see it's done here. And I'll just come in and just start fiddling with it a little bit. Loosen everything up, let everything fall together and line up perfectly like it should, and it does. Real easy to do this stuff. It's better to loosen everything up once you have the T-nuts in, just so everything can fall together on one side or the other. This looks beautiful back here on this side. I'll go over here and do the same thing on this side. I'm going to loosen those two sides real quick. There we go. And now I can push everything nice, square. I'm using my finger on the back of this, feeling for edges. And when you can't feel the edge and you just feel the crack, that means you're right where you need to be. And you can go ahead and start tightening things down a little bit. I'll do the top first, then I'll go down and double check on the bottom and make sure it's good and straight. If I feel a little bit off, I can take this and tap it a little bit, because remember, this guy down here is still loose and this one's not real tight. Just tap it a little bit. Yeah, and that's exactly where I want it, right there. And yeah, just snugging it up. Not going to get it real tight yet because I have some other things I want to do. And we'll just go ahead and go to every single bolt. Like that. There you have it. The bottom part is assembled. Now, I'm going to go to the next one. I haven't made my mind up what I'm going to do yet, but it says at this point on their instructions that you can put the feet on, and you can do that. But because I only have a support back here, and this stuff is really heavy, remember, this is the solid stuff with just very small holes, so it's a very heavy type of profile, heavy duty, which is good, by the way. I like that. But when I lift this up, it'll probably stay together to put the feet on the bottom, but I think I'm going to put one of the other parts on first to put some more support down at that end before I've tilted up and put my feet on. So when we come back, we'll take a look at how I'm going to proceed with that. So this is the pedal tray for the cockpit. I'm going to be putting this on next. And this is a massive beast here. It comes in at almost 22 pounds, and that's almost 10 kilos. So this is a very substantial piece of kit here. This looks like to be a big stamped piece of metal. It's 1/4 inch thick. The back is this way, and this is what will be facing towards the front of the cockpit. And you can see on the top, there's a lot of groove space here for mounting whatever pedals that you want to mount. On the sides, again, we have those big slots in there, and that's for height. So we can put it up and down to where we want it to be. And we also have, remember, those 1.5 inch by 6 inch side profiles where this is going to be mounted to, that they each have 4 channels in them. So we can even use the different channel heights to increase the height even more on this. So it looks like this can go pretty high. 1/4 inch thick steel plate. It's just a heavy duty unit, as you might imagine. It's really going to stiffen up the front end and give some mass to the front end of this cockpit, it being so heavy. And we're going to be using these usual fasteners here we've been doing so far, and that is the spring T-nuts here. They come with your kit. And we're going to be using the button head 5/16 bolt. So really not much else I can show you here on this as far as, what it is. But we're going to go over and put it on the cockpit and see how that goes. So now I'm just going to slide this plate in. I've got my T-nuts already attached, as you can see. So I want to put it in this top groove up here, though, because I want to be able to get as high as possible so I can get my heels nice and level with the same plane that my bottom is and the seat back there. So these are on the same angles. So you have to kind of start one and then fiddle with the other one to get it to go in. So it's going to be a bit of a dance here, I think. If you pick it up like this, you can get one started. And if I keep the angle up like that, I can get one of these guys to go in. And then I have this one that needs to go in, obviously. So I'm going to come over to the other side, bring this in. I have this a little loose still so I can maneuver these a little bit. We might be able to make this work on the first try. So I can get him in the channel, and there he goes. All right, so these guys are started in the front channels. Now I can just kind of pick it up as I bring it to myself and slide it very gently because I don't want to mess up my finish if at all possible. And I am going to start this T-nut with the ball first because that's the longer way. And that's going to allow me, hopefully, to get the next one lined up where it needs to be. And I'll just go with the short way on the other T-nut. Let's see if that'll work. Of course, this can be, like I said before, fiddly. Get one started and the other one's not started. And we don't have any way to really hold it like I did on the other one. Yeah, this is going to be a little bit. Okay. So now I'm getting this side started a little. I would not say this is going smoothly as I would like it to. There we go. I think that's got it. Yes. Okay. So that was the hardest part, was getting it up into the top channel. And now I'm just going to kind of gently, it's not really rubbing against anything. I can see that it's really not rubbing hard or anything like that. I'm just going to bring it in to where it's going to be out of the way of the front because we got another plate we're going to have to put up on the front eventually. But now I'll be able to lift this up. You can see the range that I have here. That's about 5 inches, it looks like, and it's pretty high. But I want to get this sort of where I want it to be before I get the pedals on it, because this is a heavy plate as we discussed before. And yeah, with pedals sitting on top of it, it's going to be even heavier. So if you want to make any adjustments after you have your pedals mounted, it's going to be even more difficult to get under here and pick it up at the same time you're trying to loosen and tighten these bolts over here. So I'm going to figure out a way to get this jacked up to, I'm going to do some mock-up. So I'm going to get this raised to where I think I need to have it before I move on to the next piece to put on. So let's take a look at the parts that we're going to need to use to create our feet. And here's one foot, and it has a solid metal threaded rod coming out with a ball at the end and a nut here that's made as all as one piece. We have two free spinning nuts here that's going to sandwich our plates together so we can hold the foot to it. And on the bottom we have a softer rubber piece for anti-skid or anti-slip and a harder piece here. Now this is a ball socket design, but if you look on this bolt here, let me run this down a little, you can see that there's these flat spots that have been machined onto here, even though it still spins like a ball. Interesting. So that's what we're going to be using as the actual foot. And of course, we're going to be using the usual 5/16 bolts with the 3/16 hex wrench size on the top, little button head units. And of course, our spring ball T-nuts that we've been using throughout and will continue to use throughout. And let's take a look at the plate itself. This is a 1/4 inch thick or almost 6.5 millimeters. Very hefty little plate here, 1.5 pounds. So yeah, everything that I'm pulling out of the box for this rig is very heavy because instead of being made out of aluminum like any other rig that, or profile type rig anyway, that I've reviewed, this is all steel plate, which is going to make it heavier, of course, which is going to add mass to the whole rig, make it more dense feeling, I'm sure. And I have one pre-configured here just to show you what it looks like. And yeah, pretty simple. We got both of our bolts in these two holes here, our foot holes down here, and we're going to have the foot sitting like this, and this will be sitting on the bottom of our profile right here. And of course, our T-nuts are just going to feed into that. And depending on which way, front or rear, that you're putting your foot on, in the diagrams, they're showing the foot like this. So the angle should be like this, so the foot's kicking out this way instead of the foot kicking towards each other that way, right? Of course, I suppose you can do it any way you want to. And it's just a matter of feeding the T-nuts in, very simple. And I'm always keeping pressure off of this plate as I'm feeding these pieces along because I don't want to mar or scratch up my nice powder coat finish here. And as far as the distance of putting in, that's arbitrary depending on what you want to do. I'm just going to make sure that this edge here is clear of the flat plane that runs across the back of the cockpit itself in case I want to put something up against that. It doesn't interfere with the foot itself. But other than that, you're good to go. And you can see this is going to kind of tip over. Now, there's a couple of ways to do this. I was thinking about just tipping the cockpit over on one side and then sliding them in and then putting it back down and then picking up the other side and doing the same thing. But once we have the feet on, the feet themselves will be holding all the weight. So what I'll probably end up doing is just jacking it up on one side on the back and then go over to the front, lift it up so I can slide these under and then set it back down. Probably the best way to go about doing it without putting too much stress on the connections and on the profiles that we've already have built. Anyway, we'll go over and get these feet put on and see how that goes. So now we're sliding the feet on, and you can see I already have 2 feet on the back, and you can see the direction I have the feet pointing towards the back on the back, and on the front, these will be sliding in like this, so the foot will be pointing towards the front. And of course, you could always do it the other way if you wanted to, depending on what you need. So, very simple stuff here as we saw before. Just going to slide the T-nuts in, bottom channel. Very simple. And again, I'm going to kind of eyeball it for now and put my hand under here and just snug up these nuts a little bit. I have just enough room under here to get my hand to work on this right. And we'll go over to the other one and put that one on. Same deal. Pretty quick work here once you have this blocked up. And as you can see, I am using the blocks here instead of turning it on its side and doing it. And I'll just kind of eyeball this for now because I'm not going to get it totally tight just at the moment because I'm going to level it out first. Might even move it around a little bit before I do that because this rig is going to start getting heavier as we put more parts on it. So there we have it. And for tightening this up, as you know, I don't have a lot of room down here. So I have a special wrench that I'll be using, which is this guy here. And that's a convenient little wrench to have so we can get underneath things. Put a little bit in there for the 3/16 nut. And feel it around to where it'll go in. Yeah, and then just tighten it up. Very easy to do. It's nice to have the tools for the right situation. Like that. Perfect. So, now that we have this tightened down, I'll go ahead and take the blocks out and we'll come back and see how all that looks. So I have the feet tightened down and leveled out where I want them. And at this point, I think we're going to reposition the rig to where it's going to be sitting for me to test it, which is going to be in front of the cart over here next to my 5DOF motion rig over there. So yeah, I think I'm going to go ahead and move it because again, as we're putting more stuff on this or more parts on the cockpit, it's going to get a lot heavier and it's not going to be as easy to move around. So I think I'm going to go ahead and do that. Also, if you'll notice, my pedal tray has been raised. I have this sitting 3 inches proud of the rail because I've already calculated the pedals I'm going to be using will be sitting in those slots. And also, remember, we're going to have 2 pieces going over here for our seat rails, and we'll be bolting our seat over there to those rails. So it's going to be about 3 inches or so for the pedal tray where my heels are going to be resting are going to be level with where my bottom is in the seat once it's been mounted. So it's just things like that you need to calculate as you're putting it together because it's not the easiest thing to raise this 22-pound plate, as you might imagine, by yourself. But I did have a friend called Jack, and he came over and helped me out, as you can see here. So I just ended up just jacking it up to the height I needed and then tighten everything down so it worked out fine. And you'll also see that on the next segment, I'm going to be looking at this little aesthetic beauty plate that we're putting on the front that ties the front together on the end of these 2 long profile pieces. We're going to have some bolts going in, tying that all up. So we'll go ahead and look at that next. I'm going to go ahead and put this front plate on. It's kind of an aesthetic plate, but it also has a function of tying the front profiles together. And so the profiles have tapped holes that are 5/16 threads in the top and the bottom parts of it so that it'll fit this plate. And that'll tie everything together. They show in the instructions doing this last, but really once you get your pedal tray mounted where you want it or in the general area where you want it, you can go ahead and put this on then. And that's what I'm going to go ahead and do because I'm about to turn it around to where I won't have easy access to it. So I'm going to go ahead and get this put on. And of course, all we're going to be using is the usual button head 5/16 bolts here that are a 3/16 hex wrench size on the tip. And yeah, we'll just go over and get this bolted on. I have the plate over here now. We're going to go ahead and mount it up. And as you can see, we have 2 holes that have been tapped in this profile here, these long pieces. We have one on the bottom and one on the top. And these are 5/16 threads. So we're going to be using, again, these little button head 5/16 bolts. Now, I ran into a bit of a problem, and I wanted to show you guys this, how I fixed it, or how you can fix it anyway. First off, I usually just go ahead and put one bolt in. Obviously, I'm going to lift this up, put a bolt in on this side over here. And usually when I'm doing this, I'll kind of glance at what's going on over here. And I could see right away that this hole here was too far out. It wasn't lining up with this hole. Now, I'm pretty sure this plate and the holes are milled out perfectly, like they should be. But we're dealing with a long piece of profile here. This goes all the way back down there. It's 1270 millimeters, 50 inches. If you're out just a little bit down there as far as square, when you bring it back up here this long, it just magnifies itself. So here's how we can handle this. I'm going to go ahead and put this other bolt in. I'm going to pick it back up and go ahead and put both bolts in one side. I'm not going to make them real tight. I just want them to kind of help support the plate when I'm working over here on this side, right? Then we take one of these guys. And this is a big box clamp, and I'm going to clamp the top first. Now, it's going to be easier to do this because I have the pedal tray up all the way. If I had this pedal tray all the way down, it'd be a little tougher to squeeze it together. But I need a tray up this high anyway, so yeah, it works out for me. I'm just going to put this on the top part first and just tighten it down. And this is plastic on the end of this, so it will not mar the powder coating. And I'm just going to start twisting this and turning it down until I get over here and take a look and see if my hole is lining up. We're almost there. I'm going to go ahead and see if I can tighten it a little bit more. And that's right on it. So now that I have that hole lined up, I'll just go ahead and put this bolt in, just like you would in doing anything else, obviously. Go ahead and put this in. And now I'll get down and look and see where I am on this hole. And this one's also out that way. So that means I got to squeeze it in on the bottom part. Best way to do that is to go ahead and release what I have here and then come down to the bottom here and do the exact same thing. Just line it up, and I'm going to, you see how far I have this pulled out, the edges of this clamp? I don't want it all the way in to be pushing in here. I want it to catch the very edge because that'll be the easiest way to get this to pull in. So I'm just going to tighten it up. It's already coming in. And that might have it right there. So let's try it. And there we go. That's how we fix these things. Now I can tighten these up. And I'll come back obviously with my wrench and give it a good tighten. And I can remove my clamp. And we're good to go. So now this is affixed tightly. And again, the reason I want to do this now is because I'm getting ready to flip this around, and I won't have easy access to this, especially when it turned out to be not quite aligned properly at the very ends of these profiles. Again, this is not something that surprises me because, yeah, we're bolting things together. It's not like we're doing CNC machining operations here with, you know, thousandths of an inch or a millimeter tolerances. And I know this because I did the center measurements on it. It looked to be exactly the same on these bolt holes. So it was definitely this being out. But it's nice that there's ways to fix this, and I just wanted to show you guys one of the ways to do it. Now we're going to put the seat rails on, and this is what we'll be attaching, either if you have a set of sliders, or like me, I'm just going to be putting some side mount seat brackets on top of these. But yeah, this is what's going to span across the width of our cockpit. These are 22 inches or about 560 millimeters long. And you can see I already have a T-nut in one of them. I usually preload these things before I take them over. And it's very simple what we're going to do. We're going to be using a corner bracket. We're going to use 2 for each one of these bars, with one on just one side. And instead of having one on each side, just one side, which is probably all you need. And we're going to be using, obviously, our T-nuts and our 5/16 bolts, the button heads, and our spring balls. And this is what it's going to look like when we attach it. I'd go ahead and pre-attach one. And it's very simple the way this is going to work because I already put the T-nut in here. This will just sit down across. Of course, this will be spanning our cockpit. That'll sit down across like that. We'll come in, drop a bolt in, get my 3/16 wrench, and just run that down. And so that's the way it'll sit. And then we can actually loosen this up, all of them, and be able to slide the seat back and forth very carefully, because you don't want to mar up your nice finish that we have here, this nice powder coat we have. So that's how it's going to work. Very simple. We're going to go over there. We're going to attach this and see what it looks like. Now I have the seat rail mounts mounted. Very simple, like I showed you in the first segment of this part, where we were going to mount these corner brackets straight onto the side of the rails. Couldn't be easier. In fact, because we don't have the plates on the back here in these channels, you can actually just slide this on, but you have to be very careful if you're going to do that, because again, we don't want to hurt this nice powder coat finish, which I have to say, with this black and white contrast going on here, is starting to grow on me a bit. I wasn't sure about it at first. Definitely different. So yeah, everything's successfully mounted there. Again, very simple operation. If you've been following me up to this point, yeah, this is very easy stuff to do. So what we're going to do now is get to our wheelbase upright mounts, which is one of the main things we have to do. Now we're going to install the wheelbase support uprights. And again, here, the advanced sim racing cockpit does not disappoint. Very massive and dense, heavy stuff that we're using here. This plate is 3/8 thick, and it's steel. Imagine it is pretty heavy, and that's, what is that, about almost 10 millimeters thick, just below it. And yeah, very substantial. It's over 4 pounds, like 4 pounds 4 ounces, just under a kilo, like 1.9 something kilos. So yeah, very massive plate here. And if you can see on the front here, we have some countersunk holes. Actually, this is going to be facing the profile when we bolt it on to the system over there. So we're going to have these countersunk holes, and we have these flathead 5/16 bolts that we're going to be putting in them. So when we tighten them up, you can see it will be flush and will not interfere with the profile that we're mounting this to. Very simple what we're going to do here. Flip this around. Already got some T-nuts in here. Let me put another one. Looks like I'm one short. Let's slide this guy in here. And I'm going to put them down towards the bottom edges here, because you're going to want this sitting as close to the bottom as possible, I would imagine, because that gives you as much, the maximum extension going that way as far as the wheelbase height when you mount your wheelbase support or frame or whatever we're going to use for that. We'll see that mount when we get to it. But yeah, it's just a matter of lining these up like this. Very simple stuff. We put our flatheads in. Let's see, I need 4 of those over here. And we can move this around while it's still loose to align the holes like we want them. You just look straight down in here and see them. And we take our 5/16 wrench out. And again, I'm watching my edge down here. I want to make sure it's flush. You kind of run your finger down there and feel when it's perfectly flush. And then go ahead and slowly, in a pattern, tighten this down, because I don't want it to move when I'm tightening it down. And as you pull these flatheads down into those counter bevels, right, those countersunk holes, it kind of pulls it one way or the other. So if you do it in a rotation, it'll keep everything nice and straight. That's the theory anyway. Easy enough to attach it, right? So then what happens is we're going to go over to the cockpit over there, and this is going to go up against the side of the side rails, those 6-inch tall rails. And we're going to be putting in these button heads. Now, these are a little bit longer than the normal button heads that we've been assembling this cockpit with to this point, but it's going to be the same thing, just the bolt goes through there, and they're longer because it's such a thick plate here. And then we're going to put our T-nut in and attach it. What I'm probably going to do is put the T-nuts in first, and then just come in and hold this up as I line the holes up, because we can actually slide this back and forth a little bit while we're lining up the holes in our T-nuts so that we can get our bolts in. But you'll see that once we get over there and start doing it, which we are going to do right now. So we're going to go ahead and mount this now. Now, this is a pretty heavy piece, as you might imagine, so you want to make sure that you're supported correctly for it. And what I'm going to do is just kind of hold it up. I can see my T-nuts are in here. Kind of line them up here. Now, I usually get the top ones in first, and that kind of lets it hang a little bit, and then we can maneuver around and get to the other ones. So what I'm going to do is just kind of pick it up like this, get it into my shoulder so I can get plenty of support on it. Not that difficult to do. but you want to be able to move it around a little bit so you can get into that T-nut. And once I'm in there, now I have to grab the other T-nut, or rather bolt, and come over here to the next T-nut. And I'm kind of looking down here and pulling the plate away so I can try to figure out where that thing is. And I got it in pretty easily there. See, you made it look real easy, huh? So now I'm stabilized, and that's what I want. So I'm still going to be taking the pressure off of this as I go for the other T-nuts. And what I'll do is look over here and see where it is. And a lot of times I'll just take my wrench and get down low and push that in to where I can see it lines up with the hole. Like that. And sometimes you're lucky enough you don't have to take pressure off the thing and you just screw it in. Sometimes. Not all the time. It doesn't look like this one's. You shake it a little bit while you're screwing it in. Sometimes you can grab it and there it goes. Got lucky with that one. And I'll get down and take a look at this other one. And it's a little off, so I'll put my wrench in the hole and move it back towards me. It was going that way too far. Still needs to come back a little bit. A little bit too far. Line her back up there. I think that'll do it. So, let's try it. Let's see. Looks like I got it. So there you have it. Now, I don't know where this is going to end up. So, obviously, I don't have my motor mounted. I don't have my seat on. So, yeah, you're going to have to move this. So what I usually do when I need to move it is I'll loosen these bolts up a little bit so I have enough room to pull this out and then slide it where I want to slide it. So I'm kind of taking pressure off the bottom, taking some weight off of it, and pulling out at the same time, and I can move it without scratching my finish. And I do the same thing on all finishes, gray, black, whatever it is. So it's just kind of a pick it up, pull it out, and kind of slide it. That way the only thing really rubbing is the T-nuts inside the channels where you can't see it anyway. And I'm going to leave it right about there because, again, I'm not sure where I'm going to end up with all this stuff. And I'm just going to go ahead and give it a little bit of a snug, but not real tight because I know I'm going to be moving this again. And there's no reason to get it real tight right now. I'm not going to be hanging a wheel on it at this time, but when I'm going to hang a wheel on it with the bracket and the wheel all in one piece, you're going to make sure you got this properly supported. So, yeah, not that big of a deal. We'll go ahead and install the other side, come back, and see what it looks like. So we've got the other wheelbase upright on, and they're all evened up as far as the cockpit is concerned, at least for now. I'm sure I'll be moving this later because once we get the wheelbase support or bracket on and mounted to these uprights, and then we get a steering wheel on it and all that good stuff, that's really where we're going to be able to tell where these need to be in relation to where my seat rails are. And I can move those seat rails back some more if I want to. And I can actually flip the back one around so that the brackets are on the inside and not on the outside, pointing towards the back, and give me a little bit more room if I need it towards the back of the rig. So there's a couple of ways to get this done. But yeah, everything's looking pretty good to this point, so we'll just get on to the next segment. So let's take a closer look at the mounting solution we're going to be using to put our direct drive motor onto this ASR6 cockpit. Very massive piece of 3/8 thick or almost 10 millimeter thick steel plate here. And you can see it's been bent when it was still hot. So we have nice flanges on the side for mounting. The whole pattern here will fit a SimuCube Pro, a Sport. Not sure about the Ultimate. I've never reviewed one of those. But I know it will fit either one of those because that's what it said on the box that I pulled this bracket out of. It'll also fit a midge motor, small midge at least. I've already test fit that, and that's what I'll be using for testing. And I also went over to the Cole Morgan 54G that I have, and it will also fit that down towards the insides of these slots. So a good range, I think, of direct drive wheelbases that we can put on this, or motors. And you can see we have the aesthetic cutouts here. And I like that they didn't take a whole chunk out of here in one solid piece, even though there is a disconnect in this pattern. You can see there. So it's kind of, at least they left this parts in and didn't cut all this out. So I think it's, well, 3/8 steel plate. I think we're going to have a problem with stability on this as far as bending. Take it around the side. We have on each side 2 very long slots, and this will give us a lot of adjustability for reach on the steering wheel once we have everything mounted up. And yeah, I like that they have some nice long slots on here. Now we're going to be using the bolts that comes in the kit And it comes in a little plastic bag. There's individual plastic bags for all the pieces here, so you know what you're supposed to be putting on and where to put it. I'm going to kind of counter it, do it a little. I can't do it sideways all the way. Yeah, I can, I guess. Just don't want it to fall off. It'd make a massive noise hitting the ground. So we're going to be using these 5/16 button head bolts like we have been using throughout, but these are a little bit longer, obviously for compensating for the thickness of this plate. And of course we have the 3/16 hex wrench size on the top, and we're going to be using our spring T-nuts as usual. And there's going to be 4 of these on each side. I'll go ahead and just put these on. We're going to have 2 on the top, 2 on the bottom, and I'm going to be mounting these. You could mount them in just, remember the uprights have a 3-slot pattern to them, and we could put them in any of the 2 slots we want, but I'm going to spread the load and you just mount this to the inside and outside slots. That's how I normally do all of these types of things anyway, because yeah, you want to spread the load every chance you get across the full piece of that wheelbase upright, because it's going to be a lot of weight it's supporting. I mean, we take this thing, it's 13 pounds or 6 kilos, and then we put a motor on it that's another, I'm not sure what the midge weighs, but I know it's probably around 15 pounds or so, or if not more. So yeah, we're going to have a pretty hefty piece here that we're going to have to be holding up and sliding down into those channels. And you might want to have a friend handy to help you with that when you do this. Or you could just mount the plate and then hold the motor up and put the bolts in for the motor. But I've always found it a little easier because of trying to hold a heavy motor up and getting the bolts in and then getting the nuts on the back by yourself can be a bit of a challenge. Right. So this is how we're going to mount it. And what we're going to do next is I'm going to obviously put the other pieces of hardware in here. And then we're going to go over here and see if we can get it to slide down in these channels to see just how easy or difficult that is. So you can see we have the mount now attached, and our motor is attached to the mount. And the reason it's already attached is because, as I normally do when I'm mounting a motor mount system to a profile rig, I'll mount the motor to the mounting bracket first. It's just easier for me because I'm always by myself when I do these things usually. And it's easier to wrap an arm around underneath the motor and use that as a way to balance it as I'm trying to get the T-nuts in. And yeah, I'm running some B-roll here while I'm talking and show you guys what I was doing. And yeah, you just kind of drop it straight down. You get 2 sets, or 1 set rather, of T-nuts on one side. Then you go to the other side, get the other set started. And it's a back and forth game, if you will, little dance. And the whole time I'm trying to hold up this motor mount assembly, which was no easy thing to do because it's over 36 pounds what we're looking at here, this mount and this motor combined. That's 16.4 kilos or somewhere around there. So very heavy unit. And yeah, because I've done this a lot, that's the way I do it. And this is just the way I figured out it was easiest for me to do it because I'm always by myself around here. So every once in a while I'll have a friend available to help me do something. Then another important part here is on this upright, you want to make sure that you have it loose on both sides. You want this panel, or the plate rather, to be loose. You want the bolts to be loose in that so that they will spread apart at the top, especially on this particular motor mount because it was a tight squeeze going in here with both of these sides loose. As you can see here, I still have some bolts. Well, I don't know how well you can see it, but they are loose. And then because I'm going to move it around also while I'm doing that, so that obviously I'm going to have to get the reach right on this, so I left them loose to do that too. But yeah, you want it loose so that you can spread them apart at the top here as you're putting the motor mount down in there. So yeah, we got it done. End of the day, that's all that matters. And I've already got it set up pretty much where I think I'm going to want it. I already put my seat on there, just placed it on the rails real quick just to get a general idea of how high I wanted it to be. So yeah, we'll get on to the next segment. Now we're going to take a look at the shifter mount. And that consists of the main piece, which would be the top piece that we mount our shifters to. This is a double piece of the 15 series, which means it's 1.5 inches this way and 3 inches that way. And here is a single piece. And of course, these are all solid aluminum profiles. Again, the nice powder coat done everywhere on both sides. Solid down there, so no holes in the channel pieces that are next to the grooves. Now this is going to sit in here like this. Typical of how you'll see a shifter mount done in a profile series. And the reason why you'll see a lot of this is because, well, it works. Don't mess with success kind of thing. Now we're going to have a corner bracket in here joining here. I've already got them pre-assembled, as you can see with my little T-nuts. sitting in there. We're going to have one sitting over here, and it will be sitting like this. So we have a T-nut going that way to attach to our upright over there. Same way with this guy. It'll be sitting there. Now there is another piece to this that we have to remember, and that is this spacer. This is 3/8 of an inch or almost 10 millimeter spacer. Now remember, if you saw the wheelbase uprights when we installed them on the same thicknesses, but much larger plates, obviously, to the size of the profiles that are on the base. So we need to, because when we install this, it's going to be offset from those profiles, the long profiles, by as much as the width of that wheelbase upright mount. So it's going to have an offset to it. And we have to match the offset with this down piece here. If we don't, it's going to be crooked and it's not going to work right. So we put this on the bottom like this. It'll stick out a little bit like that. One hole will go in with a T-nut in here, and the other one will go into the side of the profile. So this is how this is working. We have a countersunk hole here to the bevel there, and we have a flathead bolt that's going to go in there like this, and then we put the T-nut on the other side. Simple stuff. And it doesn't matter where you put this, because you can, it'll only matter once I start putting it on here, how I want this oriented. So I'm just going to slide this in right now, like that. Spin it around the other side, I think, because I'll just keep that kind of the same way. Now you're going to have to figure out where you want the height of your shifter, because once you have this tightened down, you can't get to it anymore. It's what we call a blind screw, because once this is on the profile, you attach this to the profile, and we have our shifter sitting in there. Let's do it like this, easier to see. If I want to move the shifter height or the brake, whatever I'm using, then I can't slide it like that, because the screw on the bottom here, that flathead, is firmly attached to this. So I can't slide it. You have to take the whole thing off to get it to slide like you want it to. And I'm not crazy about this design. I do something different when cockpits have that design, but that's what you have to remember, that you need to pre-adjust this thing to the height of the shifter that you want, then tighten it down, then you can put that piece on. Now, you could just leave this piece on and slide this piece off, right? And just loosen it here, and the whole thing will just slide this way. And then you can flip it around, make your adjustment where you think you need it, tighten it back down, flip it back around, and then slide it back into that T-nut, and then tighten it down. So it's not a huge operation, but yeah, it's just one of those things that has to be done because of the offset that this piece of profile is going to have when it's actually attached to our upright. And you'll see that more when we get there. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and pre-assemble this thing before I get it over there, because my idea is I'm going to just take this and put this forward here. Get this to go on, and we'll get this one to go in over here. Isn't it fun building with profile? So yeah, we'll have this one on here like this, and that's what it'll look like with the bottom piece down. And of course, I'll go ahead and put these on, snug them up a bit, and then I'm going to slide the whole thing down. So we're going to take it over to the rig and see how that works out. So there is the shifter mount all mounted up, and I did exactly like I said when I was showing you guys this on the bench. I just pre-installed the corner brackets on the front there, and pre-installed the one on the back, and then just went ahead and slid the front ones, the front T-nuts, you can see them down in there, from here down very carefully. Didn't want to scratch anything, and it's pretty easy to do. This is, it's not as heavy as some of the other things we've put on this rig, so yeah, not too bad. So I got it to the height I think it'll be where I want it to be if I was going to use a shifter or a handbrake or something like that. And I pre-installed the bracket back here too, and now we have our spacer located in the second from the top channel, and you can see the offset I was talking about. This is, you can see the space in between that, and of course that's created by this big plate that we mount these wheel upright pieces to, because it's offset from this panel by about 3/8 of an inch or almost 10 mil. So we have to make up for it with that guy. And again, if I needed to adjust the height, then I would take this piece here and I would just loosen this bolt and loosen this one here. Probably just take it out, obviously. And then this whole thing will slide straight down out of this bracket, and then I can take it off, readjust this piece down here to the height I want it to be on the channel to get to match up where my top bar is now, and then reinstall that, and then slide it back up into our corner bracket, tighten it back down, and then tighten that bolt right there down. And you're done. So that's how you would make adjustments. Right. Shifter mount is on. We don't have much further to go. I do have a couple accessories I'm going to be putting on, and we'll go over those next. So now it's time to assemble the keyboard accessory. And there's two ways to do this as far as the options you have for the top. This is a flat top, and it's made from an aluminum piece or sheet on each side of this with some kind of a tough plastic in between that makes it very stiff. I don't know if it's Delrin or not, but it's something, it might be because it's machinable. You can see where they kind of machine this out. And you can see the aluminum piece there, the shiny bits around that countersunk hole each side there for the flathead bolt that will go in there. We also have this monster. They're both the same length, 22 inches, but this is metal. This is 1/8 inch thick metal. So it's very heavy. It's like 7 pounds, 10 ounces, or a little over, or right at, I think, 3.5 kilos or so. So this is a substantial piece hanging off your rig, which I'm not sure how it's going to do when we put this on. I'm sure it works, but I would say it's pretty darn heavy. I think I'd rather see this in aluminum, and yeah, this is a lot lighter. It's probably going to be easier to maneuver and won't drag as much on the joint that we're going to be using. Speaking of which, this is a 90-degree pivot, and a lot of people use these. I have a couple of these on my rig for different things. Very convenient when you need it for swinging things around. And if you look on the end of these, you see these slots in here. And I have this tab piece in here on one slot, and the other side I've already got the other two installed. And if you look on there, you can see there's the number 8 on them. Here's one of them, not yet installed, and you can see it has an 8 too. But on the other side, it has a 10. Is that right? Yeah. Make sure it wasn't upside down or anything. And that's the different sizes for the channels that we're going to use on the profile. And we have a piece of profile here that's 4 inches, and I'm going to use that as an example. The 8 fits in that channel. See that there? Doesn't stay very well, but it fits in there. The 10 obviously is not going to fit. It's just too wide, right? So the purpose of these is it goes in when you push this, or rather bolt this thing on, that tab goes into the end of the channel. So it's an anti-twist or anti-torque kind of deal, if you will. And I'll show you how that works. First off, I'm going to go ahead and put this in an empty slot. And you want to make sure your slots are in the right orientation, the way you want them to go into the channels, and the way you want your hinge to be working. I left some T-nuts in here to remind me of where I want that tab to be. So when it's in there, it'll keep it from twisting. So you just kind of lay it in here. Now, I've already pressed this one in along with the others and took it back out. So when you first put these in, they usually stand pretty proud, and you have to kind of just take the joint, and we'll use the small piece for this demonstration, and just push the tabs into the joint channels. Get it to go in there. There it is. Like that. But it's going to be pushed out because the tabs are still going to be sticking out. And to press the tabs in, it's a friction fit. It's not that hard to do. What you'll need is one of these that I just dropped, but I got another one. And that's, again, 5/16 button head that we've been using all throughout this review. And I'll just go ahead and put it in the hole here that's in this bracket right there. Just kind of line the hole up, and you turn it, obviously, so we can access the hole. And as I'm tightening it up, I'm going to watch my tabs and make sure, put it back on the flat here, make sure that they're going in like they should as I'm tightening it down. Now, when you first put them in there, they're not going to want to go in real easy because it's a friction fit inside this bracket here, this actual pivot. So you're just going to keep screwing it in until it friction fits into, so it ends up like that, nice and flush. See how flat that is? Right, and they're pressed down in there, and they should stay there. But you only get to do this like once or twice before it gets too loose and they don't want to stay anymore. And then you have to kind of push them in and hold them while you're tightening it up so they don't fall out. So try to get it right the first time. So yeah, that's all there is to this stuff. Pretty simple. And we do the same thing to this profile, and this is 22-inch long profile. It has another hole that's tapped on the end of it. And on the other end, of course, it's just the powder coat, just like this little piece. And we will push this over like that. I'll put that in there. I'll pivot this out of my way so I can get to the bolt hole. Grab another bolt. Kind of lean down, see where it's going. I can get it to go in there. And just tighten it down like you would any other way, any other bolt that we're putting in. And this is already set as far as the tabs on this side, so I don't really have to worry about cranking down on it. Now, sometimes the tabs are so stiff going into this pivot flange that you have to get like I would get a 5/16 ratchet type of hex tool with a ratchet and just get some torque on it, and it'll go ahead and press in. But I was lucky and was able to do it with just my driver here. There we go. So now we have it. And this is going to sit on the side of the wheelbase, this piece here, on the wider side of that wheelbase upright support. And we have two corner brackets they give you with the kit for that. And we're just going to put the corner brackets on either side. One's going to be sitting on the top like this, and then we'll have one underneath on the bottom. And we'll have this one attached, obviously, to the upright for the wheelbase, and then the bottom one will also be attached on the other side, kind of like this. All right, just like we attach anything else to the profile. Very simple stuff. They give you enough T-nuts and bolts to make that happen with these brackets, and yeah, that's about it. What we'll do next is just go over here to the rig and install it and see how it looks. So I have the assembly attached to the side of the wheelbase upright. I have this on my left side if I'm facing the steering wheel. If you're living somewhere where you have your controls on the left side, then obviously you'd put on the other side. And you can see this swings rather nicely here. You can go all the way underneath your wheel for storage when you keep it out of the way, as long as your wheel itself is not hanging down too far down here when you're using it. Now, we're going to attach the keyboard tray to this. Let me go get that. And I got a couple of 5/16 bolts, the normal stuff that we use here on this build. And I should have this pretty much lined up. And remember, this is kind of a heavy plate here for this keyboard tray. I think I'm probably going to end up going with the plastic one because this is pretty massive. If you need a big keyboard, I guess, that's fine. Just let it hang there. Get our wrench out. Very simple stuff here as usual. When you get this far, it's just pretty much elementary at this point. And there you have it. It swivels. Again, you can type sideways or, yes, you can't really type this way. So again, I think a flat one, that's what I have right now, is more of a flat one. I think that will work better for me, but this is nice for, if you want to put a big keyboard onto your cockpit, there you go. You definitely can fit one on this 22-inch long guy. But it is putting some weight on the joint over there, but it's handling it fine because we have our two brackets tightened up on the side of the wheelbase, and yeah, no issues there. But yeah, I think if I'm going to use this, I'm going to put the plastic piece. I got to take the protective plastic off of it. It comes with this. That's that dull stuff you see there. So this peels off, and I think I would have this sitting here like this would be better for my particular use. And to attach a keyboard to this, I use wireless keyboard. I just put a strip of Velcro because the wireless keyboards don't weigh very much anyway, and just kind of stick it on there and you're good to go. It won't go anywhere. So there it is. The keyboard assembly is now on, and yeah, it's something that I would recommend that you get as far as having a cockpit, a keyboard, and a mouse tray is very important for putting your trackball on. So, as a matter of fact, we'll get to the mouse tray next. So now we're ready to put our mouse pad on, and our mouse plate tray, whatever you want to call it. Now this is two pieces of aluminum that are sandwiching some, it feels like maybe Delrin or something, stiff. There's no flex to this, so it's a nice stiffness to it. And a very simple thing we're going to be doing here, obviously, we have some countersunk holes here, and you can see the shiny aluminum bits where the countersunk holes are. We'll be putting our 5/16 flathead bolts in there like that, a couple of T-nuts on the bottom, and put it in the channel wherever you want to have your mouse or trackball. I use a trackball, so you can still use a mouse on this, but I like the trackball because it takes up a little bit more room than a mouse, but it's easier to use and try to move the mouse around. But hey, whatever you want to use, just go ahead and stick it on the top of this. So I have the mouse pad attached to the cockpit now. And yeah, very simple thing, a couple of T-nuts. We got our flatheads in there so it's not
sticking up anywhere. Very nice. And I put it down on the bottom piece because if you want to put a shifter or a handbrake or something on the top rail, then yeah, you probably don't want it hanging off there anywhere. And yeah, it's just going to work down there. I have it set up similarly on one of my other cockpits that I just kind of, when you're from my seating position, I can still reach down and get to my trackball and set up my lap and use it if I need it. But if you don't run anything up here, then obviously you can put your mouse tray up there. So that would work perfectly. All right, so we have the end caps installed everywhere. We have them on the back of the shifter here. We have them down there on the big pieces of profiles, on our seat mounting profiles, and of course up here on the top. And we don't need them in the front because we have that bracket, that fascia, if you will, going across the front of those profiles there. So don't really need it there. And yeah, I think it looks okay. You know, I'm not sure about the white on black. I'm more sure about it now after the build than I was during the build or when I was first looking at it. I wasn't sure just how I would like it. But again, this is totally subjective. It depends on what you're looking for. And this, you know, in the right room, this might be exactly what somebody wants. So yeah, it's very nice coating on this. Everything turned out well. This thing is a super heavy duty rig, this ASR6. It's very massive in weight. And of course, with that comes stiffness. And yeah, you can't ask for much more as far as stiffness comes from this cockpit. But we'll talk a little bit more about that in part 2 when I'm actually testing it with a seat on it, some wheel attached, of course, pedals, and we're driving it. And we'll be able to tell more about how it feels as far as stiffness and just performance overall for the sim racer. And yeah, remember, this is a part 1 video of the review that I'm doing on this ASR6. So there will be a part 2 called the setup. This one's called the build, obviously, because we're building it. And yeah, we'll just go ahead and get to the final thoughts. Final thoughts on the ASR6 aluminum profile cockpit from the guys at Advanced Sim Racing. This is part 1, called the build, of a 2-part review series. In part 2, I will be adding sim racing gear to the ASR6 and then testing it in real-world conditions. The first thing you noticed when you start taking the parts out of the shipping boxes is the very nicely done white powder coating on the profiles. They have a nice gloss finish, and I couldn't find any defects in that finish. Add the black brackets for support pieces, and you have the ultimate in color contrast, which I think makes the lines of this cockpit stand out more than others. ASR decided to go with a heavy version of the aluminum profile here, with no holes in the profile's channel walls like in the light and ultralight types of profiles, which gives the ASR6 more mass, which for me is a good thing. Once constructed, this is as heavy and solid a cockpit that anyone would ever want, I think. This kit was complete, with all parts and fasteners present. Building the ASR6 is a pretty straightforward process. If you are handy with a screwdriver, you should be able to build this unit. All mounting brackets are made from steel plate that has a nice black pebble grain finish to it. Brackets made from steel will have a very noticeable increase in its mass when compared to the same brackets made from aluminum plate. So there will be some areas of the build process that would be easier if you have a second set of hands to help you out. Really not much to complain about with the ASR6 kit. I did have to use a clamp to get the front end of the 50-inch side profiles lined up properly to fit the front connecting plate. But that wasn't the first time I have had to do this when building with longer aluminum profiles. All these parts come together to give a very solid cockpit result that should be a great base to sim race from. But I won't be able to comment on that until after I have put some miles on it in testing, which I will do in part 2 of the 2-part video series called The Setup. I'm Barry Rowland. Thanks again for watching the Sim Racing Garage channel. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And if you would like to help support what I do here at the SRG, visit my website at simracinggarage.com.